Gentlemen, glad you are all here. We have a truly international panel here that I'm very excited about talking to about this, as President Howard Beazey said, about the central focus of why we're here, to do business with each other. And I really can't think of some better introductory remarks than Andrew Liveris was talking from Dow, talking about let's moving forward as business people to build a better world. Tom Donahue from the U.S. Chamber, very influential in the United States. He's saying we need to improve our business climate in the United States. And in fact, this is probably the #1 issue in the United States right now. He talked about improving taxes, regulation, and the legal climate. Ambassador Shannon talked about the importance of a clear rule of law, about making sure that people can make contracts and count on each other. So all of us are here. We want to do something about business. We want to grow. And I think the statement that I heard again and again was, we're only doing about half of the trade and investment that we could and we should. And I know my firm, Anderson Economic Group, is constantly helping people try to do that, and both in the U.S. and Turkey. So it's good that we're meeting together. And we've got a great opportunity to do that today with people who have come from different parts of the world to invest in Turkey, and we have a great opportunity to talk about that. I just want to mention the folks that we've got here. Enrique Jimenez, from Spain, Managing Director of Philip Morris Turkey since March, one of the largest factories that Philip Morris has, a global company in the world, in Turkey, a logistics hub. A very important aspect for here that Mr. Jimenez has been asked to manage. He's been given an award to recognize this. We're glad to have you here, Enrique. We also have Mr. Burak Bey. I've agreed to call him Burak Bey. It's a very distinguished Turkish name, which I have difficulty pronouncing. Burak Bey, as a head of department for ISPAT, the Turkish Export Promotion Agency. All of you have had a chance to see some of the great work that ISPAT does. I will say that when we want to get a meeting in Turkey and we have a client, we want to go forward, ISPAT is always there to help us, so we're glad that you are here. We've got some interesting things to talk about as well. And Mr. J.P. Marquet from France, the Managing Director of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, one of the people that I think has done the best job talking about the potential in Turkey and explaining that to the European investors in the European community and helping to finance that. Not just big business either, just also I see small and medium-sized enterprises. So terrific panel. We're going to have about 40 minutes to talk with these gentlemen, then we're going to have a short time for some Q&A. So gentlemen, welcome. I got first question here. Fundamentally business comes down to people. That's what I see all over the world. And Enrique, you and I had a chance to talk about this, and you've had experience in multiple continents. Tell us, in your experience, what's unique about the people in Turkey, and what matters to business investors about that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for counting on me for participating in this panel. I think that all of the people over here, we share a common passion for Turkey that comes from either our professional or personal experience. In my case, both. Myself, I live in Istanbul with my 4 kids. And I think that in Turkey I found a very nice home. And I think that in my experience, the development of talent in Turkey is something that is really remarkable. Let me put only a couple of examples. I recall that once someone told me that the definition of talent is the ability to surprise. I think that the amount of individuals that we have in our organization in Turkey that have the ability to surprise us every day is very high. Just to put an example, we are considered in Philip Morris Turkey one of the biggest hubs for talent development in the world. And I think that it was last year that 5% of all the moves within Philip Morris International had a Turkish protagonist. And I think this is pretty strong. We have today over 100 Turkish expats working in different places all along PMI. And of course, this has not been something that we have built abruptly. This is something that has been developed through the years. But I think that the combination of a very strong educational system, a very strong striving culture, together with a lot of inner ambition, has made this composition of Turkish talent very competitive within the world marketplace, and at least in our case in Philip Morris, it certainly is.
That's a great place to start on here. Is always, it starts with people, what I understand, and that's something that I also have recognized. Mr. J.P. Marquet, you've talked about Turkey and the climate there to a world audience, I know through the European Bank. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're doing and why you think it's a good opportunity to grow trade and investment from Turkey.
I mean, I've been in Turkey almost 2.5 years now, and EBRD is probably one of the largest financial investors in the country. We've been investing more than $2 billion per year over the last 2 years, and this year is off again to a pretty good start. And you know, there is a lot of background noise about Turkey on geopolitics, on politics, on the refugee issues, and it's very easy to lose sight of the fundamental strength of that economy. I mean, take last year, which was a very, very difficult year for Turkey by any count. They still achieved 2.9% economic growth, 2.9%. I mean, in today's world, that's something that is really worth noticing. And this year, I mean, we see actually a fairly good trend. The business is strong. Very interestingly, we see a number of equity investments currently being negotiated. And that's new. Last 2 years, the equity market was very, very slow. So that's a very interesting development, encouraging development. You have a strong banking system, and those banks are able to finance investments, to finance companies, the big ones, the mid-caps, the SMEs. And fundamentally, I mean, I would join Enrique to say that the people in Turkey are absolutely amazing. Those entrepreneurs, the staff that you see in companies, the dynamism, the agility, the hard work, it's absolutely extraordinary and something that is a fundamental strength behind the Turkish story. So that's not to say that everything is hunky-dory. Certainly it is not, and there are a number of areas that need to be focused on. The government has a fairly ambitious reform program, and I'm sure that Burak Bey will tell us more about that. I mean, from my perspective, I would mention just 3 things that Turkey really needs to do to improve its growth potential. The first one is to bring more women in the workforce. The participation rate of women in employment is only around 30%. It's less than half the male participation rate, and it's very low by international standards. First point. The second point is innovation. Turkish companies are outstanding at optimizing industrial processes, producing cheaper than competitors, very, very good at marketing the products. They are less good at innovating, putting R&D efforts, creating new products from scratch. So that's a second challenge. And the third one is capital markets. It is a banking-dominated economy. The capital markets are extremely shallow, and that's a fundamental weakness of the Turkish economy. Not enough savings, lots of capital imported every year from international markets. That's a vulnerability, and that is a focus to fix if this economy is to flourish in the long run.
Those are excellent. We're going to come back to those. I wrote them down, the three items you had there. We want to hear from Burak Bey about the reform agenda and the efforts that are going on in Turkey right now to improve the business climate. ISPAT has been at the center of talking about the improvements and talking about selling Turkey to the international community. Can you tell us a little bit about the reform agenda you have underway now?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to express my opinion about this organization. Just last week, 2 leaders met in DC, and having this conference in this week is important, I believe. Thank you for inviting us, and thank you for giving this chance to me represent my organization. You mentioned about business climate in Turkey and the reform agenda. When we look at all the people are talking about Turkey's success after 2003. We had many reforms. Just 2003, we changed the FDI law, for example. It's directly related to our topic, I believe. And then the corporate income tax deducted, and etc. All the people knows it. And of course, in some period, the reform agenda slowed down, unfortunately. But when we look at the last 1 and 1.5 year period of time, the reforms are continuing in Turkey. Maybe because of the agenda, daily business, we are mostly going into the discussions related to Syria and etc. These economic reforms are not very visible in the media. But when we look at the last 1 year, first of all, we changed the R&D incentive system. So the number of the employees in the R&D centers is lowered. So just 15 people, you can get this R&D office certificate. And then design centers are considered as R&D centers. So companies are encouraged to make complete their design businesses in Turkey or design activities. Another aspect that if you import anything related to your R&D activities, there is no customs duties on that, etc. These are minor issues. So this was one of the important changes, I believe, as a reform agenda. Another aspect, if you want to attract more FDI, the basic thing is expats should be comfortable in Turkey. So we changed this international labor law. The work permit is easier now. We call it as turquoise card, and just a few weeks ago, secondary regulation is also completed. So some of the expats have this turquoise card now. The basic idea is like that. In the past, you were able to get a work permit for 1 year, and then you had to renew it every year. Now you can apply for turquoise card for 3 years of period of time, and after the first 3 years of time, you will have an infinite, limited time of working permit. So these are the basic things. Another area that we have to mention that is the companies were asking for more flexibility in the labor market, and we introduced a new system that private employment agencies can employ the people, and companies can employ these people on project basis or part-time basis type. So these are the mostly appreciated reforms from the investor side. Actually, when we talk about the reform agenda in Turkey, I would like to highlight this issue. The Turkish government is listening to the investors, and then we are making these amendments according to the requests or demands from the investor side. Just as an example, as the agency, we are organizing one-on-one meetings or roundtable meetings for His Excellency President Erdogan or Prime Minister or other ministers when they are abroad. And I know the examples that the President Erdogan hosted the investor itself or the group of the investors. And then he listens to the investors, he takes notes, and he gives orders to the related ministries to check these regulations if it is suitable to change it according to the investors' needs or not. And we make these regulations accordingly. So I think this is an encouraging factor for the international investors that Turkey is a country that listens to the investors and make the related or requested improvements accordingly. So as an agency, we have a role here. We have a policy advocacy role as well. So whatever the requests of investors, just feel free to approach us, and we would like to facilitate this reform period.
That's great. I want to follow up on one thing. And we had mentioned here already, every panelist talked about the talent of Turks and how they like to work, they like to innovate. You brought up something interesting, expatriates, people that come to the US or come to another country and come back. I know these people work well because I've hired at least 2 of them, and I'm not done yet. We have Ilhan Geçgil over here as the head of our practice area. who came to me from Coach University, and this is my introduction. I'm from Detroit. I didn't know anyone from Turkey when I grew up. So when we had people who came over and showed us how innovative and everything and hard work it was something that impressed me. And so tell me a little bit about the expatriate part, because as we do more trade, and I can see this myself, we often are looking at people who grew up in Turkey, came to the US, went back to Turkey, or in some manner like that, and they're interested in doing business there. They're interested in living wherever they are. Talk a little bit more about the opportunity for expatriate Turks to come back and work, and how you've made it easier.
Actually, there is no regulation limit for the Turks who have been abroad for a long time and then come back to Turkey. And we are seeing also the trend that many multinationals, it was mentioned, are hiring Turkish people to their offices in other countries, and then they are sending back those people to Turkey as high-level managers. We have many examples of other countries. But the perspective of the agency is mostly facilitate the international companies' investments in Turkey. So when they want to send expats to Turkey, which is a need for them, I believe they can also hire local people for their businesses. But of course, if the company wants to send any expat, it is important for us. As you highlighted, the local talent is mentioned, and Mr. Marquet mentioned about the participation of women into the labor force. This is another important agenda. When we look at the speeches of His Excellency Erdogan, he always gives great importance to the role of the women in the society, not only in economics, but also in all areas. And there are many reforms also encouraging ladies to join the labor force. The most recent one was that it is a very small example, I believe, but it is important, I think. The grandmothers are paid from the state if they take care of their grandchildren. So it encourages mothers to join the labor force, because traditionally people do not want to leave their child to someone else, so they want to give it to a relative or something like that. So grandmothers are being paid from the state side if the mother is working, and etc. So even these kind of small regulations, I think the reforms are encouraging people to join labor force.
All right. I want to go back to part of JP. One of your items on your agenda was innovation, and I want to ask you and Enrique. Enrique, I know in particular, Philip Morris has been on an innovation effort, and you have some really innovative technology and other things. Can you talk to us a little bit about innovation in Turkey and how you see that as a possible strength, or what we need to do to improve it?
I think that, and if you allow me just a small digression versus the question, because I think the participation of women in the workforce, I think that is a very, very important topic. I think that on this we have been working for years. Yeah, I think that basically twofolded. First, ensuring that in our recruitment processes there is sufficient representation of women. Second, helping them in their growth. Yeah, understanding. Yeah, and supporting them along this career. Today, in our management team, executive management team for Turkey, we have 11 people. Out of the 11 people, 7 are women. Yeah. And I tell you, we have constructed this through the years, but it's for us a matter of enormous pride, because we are a very meritocratic company, and if they are there, it's because they deserve it, not because of any kind of other kind of rationale. Yeah. So sorry, it was just to say that really,
Welcome.
When we talk about talent development and female participation, the two things blend together very nicely, and in Turkey we have a good example of this. Yeah. Now, regarding innovation, I think that one of the positive factors of PM Turkey is that we have the largest manufacturing facility of Philip Morris in the world. And this is helping us to, in all our manufacturing capabilities especially, be especially innovative. And in fact, the truth is that along the years, we've managed to become a hub, yeah, for everything that is regarding manufacturing, giving support to all factories that are operating in Southeast Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I think that this already talks a lot about the entrepreneurial capabilities of the Turkish people, and in our case, intrapreneurial, yeah? Because I think that really when they are given the chance and the space, I think that Turkish people come usually with solutions that are much more out of the box than what we could believe, yeah?
JP Marquet, could you talk a little bit more about innovation? And I was interested that the European Bank made a point of saying that they didn't want to just finance large projects from big businesses, but from small and medium enterprises. Now, I will have to say that this is something that nearly every government says they want to do, but you seem to have been putting a little meat on the bones. So can you explain that and how it ties up with innovation?
I mean, of course, promoting innovation in the economy is a very, very complex topic, and there are policy elements, talent development elements, and those have been very well covered by my two colleagues here. And then there is a financing element, and that's probably more of my area of competency. And Turkey needs more early-stage equity for companies that try to develop new products. And Turkey needs more development lending to allow those companies or bigger ones to effectively move up and roll out products on a bigger scale. And those are areas where we have a number of programs that are actually in place, deliver results. One is what we call our venture capital program, which is designed to inject small amount of equity, $500,000, $1 million or two, in very promising startups. And so that's something that is currently operating in Turkey. We are also trying to support the private equity industry. You have a number of funds existing in Turkey, some very large, others smaller. And we are probably supporting, I would say, 2/3 of the PE funds active on the market. But then beyond that, you need to make debt available. And debt is typically easily accessible by the blue chips that you all know, the Koç companies, the Sabancı companies, much less so for SMEs or mid-caps. And that's an area where some targeted measures are needed. The government is playing its part. They have established a so-called credit guarantee fund that supports lending by the Turkish banks for SMEs. We, as a multilateral development bank, we have also several programs to support SMEs via the Turkish banks. And one of those that we are currently developing is precisely focused on innovation. We are sourcing some support from the European Union to mitigate the risk of lending to effectively developing riskier type SMEs. And we hope that this program will facilitate access to finance and effectively tick the last box that is needed to have a full picture encouraging an innovative economy.
That's very encouraging. In fact, I think a couple of our clients may be interested in that, so I may talk to you about that a little later. That's great news. Burak Bey, could you talk a little bit about the capital markets and the innovation and what he was just talking about? This is news to me about making it easier. I will say that in the United States, this is probably the most serious problem that many innovators have, is just getting financed, their early company. The statistics for the demise of new companies are really very, very harsh. It's generally in the United States, as well as in Western Europe. At least half the companies disappear within 5 years. And I think the statistics are actually worse if you look back at the ones that never quite get into the database. So this is something where I think Turkey's actually been innovative. The Borsa is one of the innovators with private markets. I think there's a lot of potential there. But this is news to me about something to help small and medium-sized enterprises finance. So perhaps you could talk about what Turkey's doing there.
As the agency, when we look at the R&D and innovation ecosystem in Turkey, we make a division like that. First of all, there is these multinational companies, the large-scale companies, and they are bringing their R&D and innovation activities to Turkey. This is the other topic, I believe. Let's focus on the SME side and the startups. Actually, the awareness about startups and access to finance of the SMEs increased in the last years dramatically. And as the agency, we are also supporting these activities. For example, many venture capitalists or angel investor networks from abroad are visiting Turkey to make investments in those small-scale startups. We have a facilitation role in that sense. Another area is the access to finance through these institutions. There are a few banks in Turkey which are actively supporting. I don't want to give the names just to not to make an advertisement, but there are a few banks who are focused on these specific areas, and they are very aggressive to support those kind of startups which are innovative. I think we are not on the perfect level, but we are on the right track, we believe. We mentioned about, for example, it was 2 years ago, Turkey established a fund of funds structure. So this fund is giving the budget to some venture capitalists or angel investor networks. Through this channel, they are investing in those startups. State is also, I think, doing some good things in this regard. And a few of the financial institutions are also having access to European funds, which are supporting these SMEs. We have some projects in that sense as well. So, I think, as I said, we are not on the perfect level, of course. I think none of the countries are in the perfect level. But the stakeholders are doing good, I believe, to take it to the further step.
Great. I want to turn to one of the most important industries here, which is manufacturing. Manufacturing, I'm from around the Detroit area, so we do a lot of work with large auto companies, suppliers, et cetera. Our vice chairman is running a big manufacturing firm building vehicles, who's here. We gave an award last year to Sierra Nevada, who also here, manufacturing innovative things. Manufacturing is something where unequivocally, we have the potential to export more from Turkey. We have the potential for Turkish companies to invest with manufacturers in the United States. That's been growing, but not nearly as much as I think the potential is. Perhaps each of you could talk a little bit about what you think the challenges that we're facing and what we could be doing about it. Enrique, since you're actually building things, maybe we can start with you. What are a couple of things for manufacturing broadly thought of as manufacturing anything? What do you think the challenges are that we need to address in Turkey?
I think that for us this has been a gradual process. Yeah, what in the beginning was a domestic factory, because basically it was built to serve the demand from the Turkish market. Gradually has become, as I said, our biggest manufacturing center, and today we export about 1/3 of what we produce to 20 plus markets. Yeah, and I think that for this, I think that the first thing that is fundamental is the talent development. I think that we need to keep on training people to improve their skills. I think that across the years we've seen quite a strong revolution in Turkey regarding middle class enlargement, but we need to translate this even further into a skills development and new technologies acquisition. And I think that in this respect we are performing well, but education is something that takes very long to build, and we have to keep on building on it. Yeah. Regarding logistics and transportation, I think we are in a phenomenal place. I think that our geographic location really helps, first of all, but secondly, I think that we are really well communicated, and I think that this is a strong asset. And I think that in the future this will be even further reinforced with new infrastructure being built internationally. But I think that overall, I think that the development of the human talent, we are at a very high level, but we still need to keep on insisting to be able to make our manufacturing capabilities even stronger in the future, because technology is playing a higher and higher role in all manufacturing processes, and we need to keep up the speed. Yeah.
Great. Jean-Patrick, what do you think about manufacturing? And we all seem to talk about it. Our clients think it's a very, very innovative area. What do you think in terms of your role as somebody involving in the finance of these enterprises?
I will say the key word for me is integration. Integration of Turkish companies in a global supply chain, but also integration at a capitalistic level. I mean, you have in Turkey a number of very, very successful companies that are totally integrated. Like the largest Turkish company is Ford Otosan, JV between the Ford Motors Company and Koç Group, extremely successful. So you have a few of those very big corporates, but when you go down the chain towards mid-caps, towards SMEs, you just don't see the same integration. You have a number of exporters that are very good at selling stuff, but much less at building long-term supply chains, integrating technology from abroad. And that's an area where I think there is an element of cultural change that is needed. You have lots of family companies in Turkey with governance that is, well, family type governance. And those companies need to have a switch to be much more open, much more international, with much more robust governance systems to be able to establish long-term partnerships. And the same applies to the capital links. Turkey is really a private equity kind of market. You have very few companies that are listed. The stock market's capitalization is around 30% of GDP, which is extremely low by international standards. And if Turkish companies can be integrated in the global economy, they also need to have partnerships at capital level. And for that, you need a currency, you need a stock that's listed, you need to have stock market level corporate governance, and all of that is a long-term project that is being promoted by the government, supported by people like us. We are a 10% shareholder in the stock exchange itself, Borsa Istanbul, and the objective of that shareholding in the stock exchange is to try to bring about more efficient systems, a broader market, try to attract more companies to list on the market, and ultimately facilitate the integration of Turkish companies in the global economy.
That's great to hear. I'm going to turn now to what I think is one of the toughest questions, and it's one that all of us deal with, especially, I would say, in the United States, which is, why Turkey? I will tell you, having a boutique consulting firm with offices in places like Chicago, New York, Detroit, people understand why we're there. When I say we have an office in Istanbul, I get the question often, why Turkey? Now, we have an international panel here, and all of us have self-selected ourselves to think this is really important. So I'm not asking any of you to show why you think it's important, but what is the answer to the question, why should you be in Turkey? Which is, with the difficulties recently, has been a tougher question. Why Turkey? I'm going to ask each of you, but let's start with the person whose essentially job is a big part of this, why Turkey. So Burak Bey, if you're talking to someone who doesn't know, never been to an ATC conference, all they care about is business, why Turkey?
If you want it in just single sentence.
You got at least 4 or 5 sentences. This is the United States. So go ahead.
Our message is like that. Turkey is a dynamic and growing G20 economy and uniquely linking East with the West. So this is our key message to the international communities. But of course, we are talking in the United States, and these markets, must have a unique value proposition from Turkey. First of all, you mentioned about why don't we manufacture in Chicago or somewhere else in the United States. Turkey has a unique position, I believe, for US companies. And when we look at the past, according to statistics of Central Bank, since 2002, we attracted $11 billion of investment from United States. So, and when we look at the statistics of other institutions, like one of the associations in Turkey engaged in American-Turkish relations, the investments of US companies more than 50 billion. I believe there is a basis in Turkey for US companies, and the reason they invested, we believe, first of all, it is easy to access to a wide region. First of all, we are a part of customs union with the European Union. It gives us to access to this market without any customs tariffs and etc. And we have more than 25 FTAs, free trade agreements with the 25 countries. So this is also another enabler for companies to access a wide region. And when we position Istanbul to the center, and if we draw a circle for 4 hours of flight zone, you can access to 1.5 billion people with a purchasing power, high purchasing power. You can consider China or India, etc. But the region is very rich compared to the other regions of the world. And also in the south and east of Turkey, there is a young population in those export markets. When we look at the local dynamics, other than these target markets, Turkey, the average age is 31, around 31 now. And the young population, it both consumes and it both produces. So it is another motivating factor for companies to position in Turkey. Another area that makes differentiation from the other countries, our investment incentives and R&D incentives are better in compared to other our rivals or competitors in the region, we believe. So we can mention about many other top reasons, but we always shorten it as a Turkey is a growing and young dynamic economy and uniquely linking east to the west.
You're a very good salesman, Burak Bey. We appreciate that. All right, why Turkey, Enrique? Like neither you nor I born in Turkey. You're running a business enterprise there. You're talked about with some pride and justifiably so, the women that are there, the managerial, the innovation. What do you say to someone who doesn't know anything about Turkey?
Well, I tell you, I see so many things that if I begin, I'm not sure when will I end. No, but to make a long answer short, because it's very difficult to find elsewhere in the world such a strong combination as the one you find in Turkey. Big population, very young. After the last years with a very hefty middle class, yeah, that is very well educated, that has a passion to perform, and all this placed in one of the best places and best locations in the world as a bridge between continents. I think that how many places can offer something like this in the world. I think that it just makes sense, yeah? And on top of, I think that you can find a plethora of examples of companies that found a second home in Turkey. Mine is one, but there are many others that along the years managed to build a very nice and successful story, yeah, that should serve to corroborate the fact that, again, it's a very powerful combination, pretty rare and unique in the world.
I agree with you. It's great to hear. All right, JP Marquet, your website, I would say, recommending on, again, the European Bank's website with some really good, interesting information, very helpful about doing business in different places. But let's say someone doesn't have access to your website, you run into them, social occasion, business person, I can invest, I'm interested in all these things, but why Turkey? What do you say to them?
And I can tell you it's a question that the board of directors of the bank is asking us regularly, because Turkey is 20% of the overall business of the EBRD. So, people are asking lots of questions when you have such a concentration. And, I would echo Enrique, look at alternatives. I mean, Turkey has a quite unique combination if you compare with similar size, big emerging markets. But also listen through the background noise. Look at those elements like you have a strong banking sector that is able to finance industry, finance trade development. Look at public finance. The government has only 30% to GDP of public debt, which is extremely low compared to peers. Look at that private sector, something we've been talking a lot in this panel, the dynamism, the entrepreneurs, that is absolutely unique. And then, look at things that are not so well known. Look at, say, the resources. Turkey has a very rich subsoil. It's not very well known. It's not being very much developed to date, but it is there waiting to be developed. Look at the renewables potential. It's one of probably the best countries to develop renewables, geothermal, solar, wind, hydro. So you have a number of elements that are really standing up, provided you put in the effort to look through the smoke that is surrounding the geopolitical and political situation in Turkey.
All right, last point I want to give each of you a chance before we ask some of our audience members. And I really like how you put it. Look through the smoke, look through the background noise. I have to say, it's been a tough last month to be an American and think about this relationship. And we've all listened to some things that are pretty hard to talk about in terms of politics. But all of us are here talking about looking through the background noise, seeing the potential, trying to grow. And I think the Tom Donahue, the U.S. Chamber president, expressing the frustration of Americans to get their country moving, and you saw some of that in the U.S. election, very surprising even in the U.S. And we want to look forward. We want to do something that's positive. So if you have one last thing you want to say before we listen to our audience here with some questions, what are the things you would say about why we should look forward? We'll start with you, Burak Bey.
In terms of U.S.-Turk relations or?
In terms of business, because that's what we're here to talk about, Burak.
Okay. My focus is mostly on the FDI side, and I mentioned about the reforms. When we look at the reform agenda of the government, it will continue. We are currently discussing manufacturing reform in Turkey and some reforms related to industrial places, for example. So this gives me a confidence that companies can invest in Turkey in the long run because of our commitment to the reform agenda in the long run.
All right, reform agenda, you're moving ahead. As you said earlier, the President, Prime Minister, the government is listening to investors. Clearly, that's part of the optimism in the United States is a lot of people think that the current administration is interested, open for business, as you heard. You're saying same thing about the administration in Turkey. That's good. Okay, Enrique, why should we, if you think of one thing why we should be looking ahead?
I believe that everything is a matter of perspective. I think that if we look at the things very, very close, of course, everything seems to be gigantic. When we begin to put some distance between what we see, and we have a more holistic and complete view, I think that then you can take or make more sounder business decisions, And I think that in our case, we've been present since the early 90s in Turkey. I think we have a long-term perspective, and I think that we know how to separate something that is regarding fundamentals and structure from someone that is more conjunctural. And I think that in moments of difficulty, the best thing is to try to put a little bit of perspective, get a little bit of distance, so that we can have a better perspective on topics.
In moments of difficulty, try to keep that perspective, see the positive thing, move forward. Good thoughts. JP Marquet.
I mean, I know that when you guys are looking at investing in Turkey today and talk to your board, it's a tough sell. There is no doubt about it. But talk to the people who are already in Turkey. Enrique is one. There are probably many more. Those foreign investors that have invested in Turkey are very happy with their business. They are making good profits. They have efficient operations, and they can tell you that it is a very favorable environment. And I think that's the best reference you can have.
The best reference you can have are people that are there doing business. That's it. That is a pretty good reference anywhere in the world. All right, we have a chance for, I think, about 14 minutes where we can talk with our distinguished audience members. So we've got a chance to hear from some of you that are doing business. Looking ahead, you had some great remarks from these gentlemen that are here. So I think we have a person back there with a microphone, which is going to be hard for the moderator to see. So you're going to have to make sure you wave your hand. We have some folks that have a question for our distinguished panel members. Over there, there's a gentleman right there.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, should I stand up?
You can stand up. You can tell us who you are.
Okay. Well, it was very nice to hear optimistic assessments from a distinguished foreign investor and a banker, if I may call EBRD as a banker, yeah? Okay. However, I would like to raise a comprehensive question about the assessments, actually, because I'm a quite mature Turkish citizen. Who's a long-standing advisor and businessman in Turkey. Therefore, the optimistic assessments are always should be a little bit further deepen it in terms of real meaning, because we heard two resident expats. They are living in Turkey, and therefore they see the positive side of the coin. However, if you look at the investment climate in Turkey, volatility of exchange rate, the high unregistered economy, the increasing private sector debt, which is found risky by many. So all those factors also make the Turkish economy a bit sensitive for investment. So, more than this, the perception of Turkish economy. Since they are living in Turkey, they are getting accustomed, like us, to Turkish conditions, and they are becoming more optimistic. But if an outsider, total outsider, looking to Turkey, would the perception of him, would it be the same as gentlemen? That's my first question.
All right, let's do the first question. That's plenty. There we have a mature business person with a lot of experience who's pointing out, as we all know, that if you're in Turkey, you have a chance to see things more closely, and you gentlemen talked about it, as I did. But what about someone who's a total outsider? And as you mentioned, the perception. Let me start as the person who is the most total outsider, having grown up outside Detroit, as I said earlier, knowing no one Turkish, never knowing where I'd ever go there, and deciding over time that I wanted to invest there with our company. You have one of my colleagues right down the road from you. Why do we do that? What's the perception? I will say the perception is hard right now. It's been a bad month, all right? And it's been a bad year. And we don't, we spend a lot of time talking about politics elsewhere. We're talking about business here, but I have to acknowledge we got a perception problem we need to deal with. I do think when I talk to people, when I answer the question, I posed you gentlemen the question, why Turkey? Okay, so I'll answer here. Why do we talk about there? Well, how do I answer it? I acknowledge that it's a different part of the world. I point out some of the things that have been said about as tough a place as it is, it's the best place in the region. They have rule of law, they have a constitutional democracy, and they're a NATO ally, and they've been doing business and they're friends for a long time. And then I actually go to what Enrique said about the people, about the work ethic, and about the future. And I will admit, I also talk about how the food is good and how the, you know, I'm from Michigan, we have beautiful lakes and everything. I love being along the Bosporus, it looks great. So I am a little optimistic, and I think optimism is a good thing. We're a consulting firm. We don't sugarcoat the numbers when we tell people, but fundamentally it's about making a decision about where you want to invest and who are you going to take a risk on. I completely agree with you about the perception that we have to deal with. I completely agree that we need to work on some of those issues that cause instability, that make people fearful of approaching Turkey. But I'm optimistic, so that's my answer. But gentlemen, let me give you all a chance to give something there before my microphone goes.
I mean, I stand to my assessment that there is a good story in Turkey, provided you make the effort to dig through the background noise. Now, if there is one area that gives me some sleepless nights, so to say, and I mentioned that at the very beginning, it's the reliance on foreign capital flows to finance this economy. Turkey needs to import around $200 billion every year of capital from international markets. That's 25% of GDP. It's a lot, it's a huge dependence. That's what's causing the volatility in the Turkish lira. And it's not easy to fix. To fix that, you need to build savings in Turkey, which today do not exist. You need to have a well-functioning capital market, which is work in progress. And so it's a long-term effort. Everyone knows about this, and that's clearly an element you need to factor in to any decision about the country. What we see at micro level is that there is a realization by the banks, by the corporates, that this is a vulnerability, and we have seen over the last 2 years a trend towards trying to move to Turkish lira financing to effectively mitigate that risk, but it will take time, and yes, there is an element of uncertainty in that respect.
Enrique.
Well, I'm not going to argue with such a distinguished member of the Turkish business community. I think you got a point. Yeah, that's clear. Yeah, but I basically trying to summarize how I see things. First of all, I think that I better be coherent with what my company has been done in the last 3 years. Last 3 years, we have invested $300 million in Turkey. So I think that we wouldn't have done it if we wouldn't share a strong belief, in the future of the country. Second consideration is, yes, we have a lot of turbulences or random turbulences, but I think that many countries in the world share the same concerns, and at least when I meet with my colleagues, I see the same preoccupations, and that are also part of their daily business life. And then third, what I think is that we all need to make an effort to improve the narrative of what the Turkish economy is about. I think that you are somehow pointing in this direction, and this is why I think that these meetings are important. This is why I think that our presence here makes sense, because I think that Turkish narrative needs to be built every single day. This is our obligation, and I think that we are part of it. And I, again, think that in this effort of improving the narrative, we are all part of it, without ignoring, of course, the difficulties and the shortcomings that we might have at a given point in time, but still maintaining the level of optimism for something that is structurally good. Yeah. So that's my attempt to
Well
answer
said,
your
Enrique.
comments.
All right, we have time for one more question. We have a question right back there.
Good morning. Thank you for all coming over here. You guys touched all significant points in your speech. My question is for Mr. Marquet. As we all know that Turkey hosts more than 3 million refugees in the southeast part of the Turkey, where the infrastructure is not really well developed. I would like to ask that what are the specific policies of EBRD to support the SMEs as well as the MNCs in the region to attract the investment in that part of the region? Thank you.
All right. Question about support of SMEs.
Yeah, it's of course a major issue for Turkey, and the issue is growing as everyone realizes that those people will stay. They are not here in transit, they are staying, and so clearly the challenge is now to create jobs, create schools, health facilities, general infrastructure, public transport, to effectively allow them to have a livelihood alongside the local Turkish community. And we have a number of programs already. We are supporting vocational training around the Gaziantep region. We have programs to facilitate the creation of SMEs by providing effectively technical assistance to establish companies. And we are at the moment discussing with one very large Turkish bank a credit line to effectively offer access to finance for companies to invest, grow their facilities, employ more people, and ultimately benefit the refugees alongside the host communities. It's a very complex and very long-term endeavor. Many people are working towards the same topic, but it is critical given the number of people affected.
All right, thank you. Great. We'll give each panelist 45 seconds to tell us one reason why we should stay optimistic, look through the noise. One reason. I know you have an entire list of things, Burak Bey. What's one reason you tell people? Why should we stay optimistic?
The population in Turkey is young. There are many statistics on that, and the young generation is optimistic, I believe. Turkey has this dynamism from its population and its talent. So when I see the enthusiasm among my friends and the younger generation, I'm hopeful about the Turkey's economy and its future.
All right, young, optimistic. All right, that's one. Enrique.
I think that there are many, but if I have to summarize one, I think that the talent capital Turkey has deserves no other thing